transit. So I'm just going to reintroduce myself and then reintroduce everyone on the panel here. So my name is William Vogel. I use he, him pronouns. I am the former executive director of El Museo from 2017 to 2021. We conceived of this project back then. It's happening now. I think you all know why. But we're really excited to be able to talk sort of the nitty-gritty of transit, right? We talked about art, we talked about architecture, we talked about development, and these are like big abstract concepts that are a lot of fun to think about. But when you're trying to get from point A to point B, you know, what's going on in the station doesn't necessarily always matter. So we're going to talk a little bit about the issues that affect transit from a variety of different perspectives. Hold on, I forgot my notes here. So I'm just going to read through everyone's bios real quick, and then you'll have the opportunity to reintroduce yourself, and then we'll take it from there. So our speakers are Bridge Rauch from Buffalo Transit Riders United. Bridge has a master's of regional planning from SUNY Albany and has lived on the west side of Buffalo since 2009. And they have volunteered and worked extensively in Buffalo's nonprofit sector, including with the Service Collaborative of Western New York, Preservation of Buffalo Niagara, and the Coalition for Economic Justice, where they currently serve as a board member and volunteer for Buffalo Transit Riders United and the Buffalo Mutual Aid Network campaigns. We've got Anna Blatto, a research associate from the Partnership for the Public Good. And Anna is a recent graduate of the University of Buffalo with degrees in sociology, woo, and urban and public policy. Her areas of interest include social equity and justice, racial and spatial segregation, very relevant today, neighborhood effects, affordable housing, and transportation, and their relationships with social and urban public policy. We've got Jim Gordon, the treasurer and unofficial historian of Citizens for Regional Transit. Jim Gordon is a data analyst who understands the need for community involvement in transportation issues. And as treasurer, Jim maintains the financial records for CRT and believes that all segments of the community benefit in measurable, tangible ways from a strong, well-funded, and managed public transit system. And I don't have an official bio for Helen, but this is Helen Terrace, the Director of Public Affairs for the NFTA. Thank you all so much for joining us. So if there's anything that I need that needs to be added, please let us know a little bit about yourselves, and then I'm going to sit down and we're going to talk about transit. If anybody has anything to add? Sounds like we're good to go. So let me just move this over. Thanks everybody for So thanks folks for taking the time to sit with us today. So I had four major subject areas that I thought we could sort of touch on, and we hopefully will get into a nice spirited discussion about some of these issues. So I think everybody on stage now can agree, and really everybody in this room can agree, that transit is really important, not just to us as individuals, but to our society, to the functioning of the city, of city life. And so I figured I would start by throwing this out there. What is, in all of your opinions, the importance of public transit? And I guess we'll just go down the line, so we'll start with you, Bridge.
Yeah, I would say, cities are ecosystems, and our living bodies. And public transit really is the lifeblood, it's what connects everything. If you don't have a thriving public transit system, you do not have a thriving city, you do not have a thriving region. We've made a lot of mistakes, with our public transit systems, and but one of the advantages we have here in the Buffalo region is that we have a urban fabric that's built around transit, whereas in other parts of the country and other parts of North America, that were built after 1950 or so, they don't have that, like, that advantage. So it's fundamentally, if you want equity, you want, you want like a thriving city with like, people having access to their basic needs. To be able to like, get to food, get groceries and get to their job and, like pick up their kids, all of that. You need to have, transit as the baseline, and, it's one of the reasons like Buffalo has struggled so much, I feel like, since like the 50s, was we, shifted away from transit. And we've, we have had a very classist and racist attitude toward bus use in particular. Everybody's in favor of like bringing back the trolleys, which I love trolleys. But like before we get to that point, we should really be like supporting bus use, and like making that, like that connective, like that lifeblood, like bring it back and like start to like bring back that public infrastructure and that public support. So I'm gonna pass it on.
Yeah, I just echoing pretty much all of that. I think a lot of us are going to agree with each other on a lot of these topic areas. But when it comes to public transportation, this area, the city of Buffalo has a really strong network of buses. But when it comes to access, it's challenging a lot of times for residents of certain city neighborhoods to reach areas, particularly outside of the city, not only in terms of the number of transfers that you might have to make, but specifically in terms of the amount of time it might take for you to reach certain areas outside of the city. So when we talk about access and connectivity, the area is not really designed very well for folks who may not have a car or easy access to a vehicle. We have a really strong network of buses, but sometimes those buses aren't necessarily reliable. They may run inconsistently. They may not run on weekends, so that creates challenges. Transportation is pivotal to an equitable city. Being able to get from point A to point B in a reasonable amount of time, in a safe amount of time, in an affordable way is super important to making sure that folks who live in any area of the city have access reasonably to other areas for needs. And thinking about amenities and thinking about the impact of segregation specifically on communities in Buffalo. Segregated neighborhoods often have less access to amenities or less amenities located within those neighborhoods. And the lack of reliable transportation exacerbates that issue even more. In response to, of course, recent events, the NFTA has done what they can at this point to provide additional resources and additional transit from neighborhoods and affected communities to other communities. And what we're hoping for is an expansion of that, not only a month from now, but ongoing expansion and access, reduced cost fare for folks that may live in areas that are more impacted by segregation, but not only that, an increase of reliable access to the areas, not only within the city of Buffalo, but outside of the city of Buffalo, comes to jobs, services, amenities, etc. So transit is just so pivotal in the interconnectivity of our region for those reasons and so many more.
So I'm Jim Gordon. I'm Treasurer for Citizens for Regional Transit. Our organization got its start way back in the 1960s when the original Metro Rail concept was started, and the federal government required that there be a Citizens Advisory Board, and we are that organization from that original plan way back then. And we just stayed together and kept going after the rail system was, the current system was built. Access. Round my word. But it's also access for more than just people going to work and school. It's access for people who can't get around the way able-bodied people can do it. We have disabled people. I can't tell you how many times I've been on Metro Bus and Metro Rail and seen riders get on wheelchairs. My own mother used to have to get on the Metro Bus using her wheelchair, her walker, she was eventually moved to paratransit, a whole operation of Metro that helps disabled people. It's so critically important to those people. When my mom went to a nursing home, to go anywhere, it was $75 a ride. I picked a nursing home with my mother. She also got involved in it. And we deliberately chose one on a major metro line so that she could still go to restaurants, still go to places, even though she was living in a nursing home. It's incredible how enabling that kind of experience is. And also that it doesn't come up often, but there is a substantial amount of rural area in Western New York, and there is rural transportation. NFTA Metro mostly focuses on the urban, but there is also public transportation for the rural areas, and that's an important component of public transportation.
Thank you. My name is Helen Tedros, and I'm with the NFTA. I'm relatively new to government, so I just love these types of events so much, you have no idea. And I think I would be remiss if I didn't mention, here we all are on a beautiful July day talking about public transportation, and it just shows the heart of Buffalo. It really does. And the NFTA, we're not perfect, we know that. We are changing and evolving, just like the city of Buffalo. And I think that, and I'd love to kind of discuss this a little further, the awakening that's happening here in Buffalo. I think we can all feel it. I see it with my kids. My kids are probably your age. I see it with the young people. I see it with the people who we're working with. Accessibility, paratransit. Paratransit is probably the one service that we are seeing the same level of ridership as we did pre-pandemic. We are still at 50% of what we were. Everything has changed. COVID, like every organization, every industry, has dramatically affected what we do. It has been a challenge, to say the very least, in an already challenging situation. But in that sense, it's kind of made us all grow together. I feel like our relationship with some of the organizations has really softened a bit, and I feel like we're all beaten up so much that we're getting together more. And I just want to take this opportunity to thank our rider organizations for helping tremendously with what is now our biggest challenge, is the labor. We have a very challenging issue with operators and mechanics and the supply chain. We were supposed to have some 4 or 5 of our electric buses arrive. It's late. Everything is late. And everything feels different. Transportation feels different. We've been masked up. And you know, when you talk about accessibility and reliability, we had, and it was interesting because this occurred, I want to say, late winter, springtime, when we saw an incredible amount of absenteeism because of COVID, coupled with the driver shortage. And what was happening is, talk about reliability and the importance of that, we were having to cut routes that day, 10 minutes before. It was awful. It was a terrible situation for our riders. And I don't like to compare us with the airlines, but I felt for them because the NFTA Metro, we want the best reliable service possible. We do everything we can. We have engineers working, we have a service department, all riders who work very, very hard to get people to jobs, to get people to where they need to go. I was really proud that the NFTA did suspend fares during the heart of the pandemic when we were at 30% ridership. That is unheard of, and even more so than MTA. MTA was not at 30%. So that showed to me the importance of public transportation. So I think working together, having these difficult conversations, you know, it's not easy to sit here and listen to, you know, criticism. No one likes to be criticized, but it's needed. And through criticism and through critical thinking comes a partnership and comes change. And I do feel it. Just wanted to mention really quickly, one of those criticisms is now something that is one of the best things that's happened this year. We heard, and Jim could tell you, a lot of riders telling us, we can't get to beaches, we can't get to the parks. You know, there's no access to that. And okay, and it came up on survey after survey, let's try this, let's try something different. Albany tried it as well. It was not successful. Other agencies in the country tried it, not successful. For some reason, it just didn't resonate. We had a packed bus today. We have 3 free trips, and we collaborated with New York State and Erie County, and walking, and I walked on the terminal this morning, seeing all the kids getting ready to go to the parks. Talk about equity. I mean, that's what this is all about. That's Buffalo. That's what we need to work on. Things like that, taking something that's a situation, and I always tell, I'm a people person, I'm not a numbers girl. I'm not the first one to tell you that. I often, we talk with the engineers and with the planners, and we say, well, I'm in the people business. It's not a planning business. Yes, planning's involved, but these are people. If only 2 people ride a route, that's 2 people that are affected. These are humans, and I think it's important for everyone here to understand that that's our business. We're a public authority, we're a government agency, which never gets, we'll never get a lot of love, but we do want to do the very best we can. And thank you all for coming and sharing with me, because I will take all of what I'm learning today and try to improve what we need to do.
Well, thank you. So let's thinking about that now and the importance of transit, right? We've talked sort of loosely about who uses it, but I don't think we've really drilled down into really who the users are. And so this is my backstory, right? My transit backstory. I used to get up at 6:30 in the morning. I would take the 22 to Summer Bus Station. I'd get on the train. I'd go to university. I'd get on the 44. I'd take it almost to the end of the line. Hour and a half trip, should be about 30 minutes by car. And I was doing that so that I could get to work. We know that people have to get to work, they have to get to their appointments, they have to get to parks, they have to get all over the place. But we have these concepts sort of in the abstract, but really who uses transit? And I think, Anna, I think you're a good person to start with based on your research. Who fundamentally is the transit user that we're talking about when we're having this conversation?
Absolutely. So statistically, public transit users tend to be lower income. In the city of Buffalo specifically, because income and segregation and race are so tied together, primary users of public transportation also tend to be people of color. So when we look at the city of Buffalo and when we look at these statistics, and these are pre-COVID statistics, a lot has changed since COVID, and of course it requires additional analyses, but realistically the statistics probably haven't changed too much in terms of the composition. But when you look at the folks who live in the city of Buffalo specifically, 17% of folks, black folks who live on the east side, use public transportation to access jobs, to commute to work. And 9% walk or bike. So these are folks that don't rely on cars as their primary method to get to and from their place of employment. And that number increases the lower income folks are. So that statistic is really for folks who are making somewhere between, I think, $40,000 and $65,000 a year. It goes up the lower the income is. So you tend to see, of course, lower income folks are more reliant on public transportation. And that breaks down into additional complications when it comes to lower income folks who may not have as much time to be able to rely on additional time to getting transported from to and from work. There's a whole kind of theory called the time travel penalty, where folks who are forced to rely on public transportation because they have no other reasonable alternative are also limited in their ability to have reliable childcare, for example. So they might spend potentially more of their income on childcare because they're going to be relying on childcare for longer periods of time. They might have less time to spend with their family, less time to spend going grocery shopping or doing essential things like healthcare access. And so you start to see all of these other, it's a domino effect. So, instead of spending 20 minutes a day commuting, maybe spending an hour and a half commuting, one way to get to a job, and then that's an hour and a half a day approximately that you can't spend doing other things, more money that has to go into childcare and other essential activities. So the primary users of public transportation tend to be the lower income folks, more vulnerable populations who tend to be ignored and more so ignored in public policy conversations, especially public policy conversations that occurred at the time when the public transportation network that we see today was being developed initially. So that's just kind of a high level overview, and these are statistical representations of our primary users of public transportation, not only for job access, but folks who rely on public transit for general things, going to parks, going to access different amenities. And over 30%, about a third of residents of Buffalo's East Side do not have cars. And so when you look at the amenities that are available in those communities and access to amenities in other communities, that amount of time that it takes to get from point A to point B really plays a huge role in the day-to-day lives of folks that don't have cars, who overwhelmingly tend to be people of color, who overwhelmingly tend to live in segregated communities on Buffalo's East Side. I was listening to a radio show this morning on Power 96.5, and they were talking about pools and the fact that City of Buffalo outdoor pools have not opened this year as a result of labor shortages, and that's just another huge component in all of this. Is it's kind of throwing a wrench in our ability to make really quick, immediate changes that might have otherwise been able to be made if there was an abundance of labor. And they were talking, they said, the outdoor pools are all closed. And they made a justification saying, well, we're going to put our resources into making sure that indoor pools are open throughout the summer and are fully staffed throughout the summer. And they mentioned where the indoor pools located that they were opening up. One's in East Lovejoy and one's in South Buffalo. And what do those communities look like demographically? And what does access to those places look like? Okay, well, they were saying, well, you can hop in a car, drive. Well, actually you can't, and you're looking at all these different, roadblocks, barriers to being able to access these outdoor amenities. So it's really an ecosystem. It's not just, okay, these folks are relying on public transportation. It'd be one thing to say people of color are overwhelmingly relying on public transportation, but the network is really extensive and it's almost as good as, or it's almost as reliable or as efficient as taking a vehicle. It's different to say overwhelmingly people of color rely on public transportation to get places, but that system is not as reliable as taking a vehicle in the ecosystem that we have today. So that is my information on that.
And so kind of taking off on that, so I first became aware of Buffalo Transit Riders United through some initiatives on the Lower West Side when there was the bus realignment, and I'm not 100% sure how things panned out with that, but I know that your organization is more sort of folks on the ground, and you have more of a picture of how things sort of flesh out. So maybe, would you be able to give us maybe more insight on how that affects people on a day-to-day?
Absolutely. So Be True got started around like 2015 as a program, as an organizing effort from the Coalition for Economic Justice. It was labor, like folks from labor unions and community groups all coming together and saying listen, we can't get places. Like that stat about 1/3 of Buffalo households don't have a car is, that it's that pool that we need to be focusing on. To bring up pools again, but we focus far too much in our transportation policy around public transit on what are called choice riders, the folks who are deciding, okay, no, I want to take the bus into town, use the park and ride because I don't feel like driving to the hockey rink when there's all that traffic down there. I'm going to park at the Metro Rail and take it downtown and avoid the traffic. Meanwhile, there's a third of Buffalo residents who they need this public, they need
100,000 people.
100,000 people, 100,000 people. So I personally, like, I'm kind of, I don't drive at all. I am like physically mobile enough that I love to walk and bike in the summer. Wintertime, I am completely reliant on public transit, and my world shrinks. You know, like I am like restricted basically to the within the city of Buffalo during wintertime, and I have to like scramble over snowbanks and broken sidewalks and icy sidewalks. And that's not just it's not just the nature of the NFTA. That's like our basic public infrastructure throughout our region is just abandoned. There's entire sections of within my neighborhood on the west side, but especially at in neighborhoods on the east side where the sidewalk is gone. It's just rubble. Is all that's left. So we have to talk we need to talk about how we can improve NFTA. I took the bus earlier this week, the number 3, which is one of the most frequently used bus routes in the city, highest ridership in the city. And I had gone to Wegmans to get some odds and ends I can't get anywhere else except for Wegmans. So I was like, okay, I'm just gonna walk to the corner at Amherst and Grant Street and take the 3 there. And it was running once an hour. I was there for 45 minutes waiting for that bus with 10 other people. It was 12 at one point, but the 2 people decided it was easier to just walk. I don't know how far they're going to walk, but they decided it was just going to be faster and easier to not take the transit anymore, just good to not wait for the 3 anymore, just to walk. And it was mostly people of color. It was mostly women, mostly a couple kids. It was a couple people who English is their second language or third language, and there's no language accessibility within our transit system. It was there was a fella there with a walker, so he was just stranded waiting for this bus. He didn't have any other options. I could have just decided to walk. I'm breaking in these sandals, so I've got blisters and stuff on my feet, so I was I'm just gonna wait. There are a lot of people who they literally have no other option. 100,000 people have no other option except for public transit, and we are not emphasizing their needs nearly enough. It's not just transit. It's basic food equity. It's the food apartheid in the city. It's our housing costs. It's systemically, this is the population that we as a region need to be centering in our public policy. Not just NFTA, not just our transportation, everything. And we don't. As a region, as a nation, we don't, our public policy does not care about those.
As well as the cargoes, and it needs to be a system that throughout the region does its thing. And we have many different kinds of transit, as I was pointing out earlier. We have the paratransit. Buffalo has heavy rail. Hardly anybody ever thinks about it. We actually have heavy rail. We have Amtrak that takes you from Buffalo to Niagara Falls and go Buffalo to Toronto. You can go east to Boston, New York City. Buffalo, we have Niagara Falls. I don't know too many other cities this size that have that much access. So people who are taking the heavy rail are going different places for different reasons. We have Metro Rail, which takes care of about 2 million riders, and we would easily double that simply by extending it to Amherst. There's always this tug of war, should we or shouldn't we? Because the further out we go, it's encouraging suburban sprawl. But on the other hand, it's good for the environment, because 1 lane of rail track is the equivalent of 3 to 6 lanes of highway. And you just look at the footprint of 1 train track versus these mega sprawling urban highways that demolish all the neighborhoods.
20 lanes.
The train runs on electricity, and it doesn't even have tires. It runs on steel wheels that don't cause any environmental impacts. And you start figuring out, and how much does a bus cost? How much does a train car cost? How long do they last? All of a sudden, you start comparing what is the capacity of all these systems. So there's a right thing for each kind of rider. And it's getting that right balance in addition to all of the other factors, the frequency, the reliability, and does it go where we want it to go?
Yeah, for sure. And how, yeah, you.
I do want to address that,
Sure.
particularly because I remember seeing this quite frequently, this point of someone from the west side of Buffalo going to Cross Point and it taking 45 minutes versus 45 minutes, maybe even an hour on public transportation versus 20 minutes in a car. Unless you're driving 100 miles an hour, that's just not even close to being accurate. But I do want to point out that the NFTA had an agreement with Cross Point. We pretty much had an express route. Like, you can't get any more convenient than that. They were going, our riders were going to and from.
Just the 67, I believe?
Yeah, no, it was actually a special route.
Okay.
I think it was Geico and Fidelis actually bought corporate passes. And as you say, is it a matter of convenience or a matter of lack of a robust system? I mean, or is it just people wanting that freedom of getting a car and almost like a mindset, right, in Buffalo, like a mindset? And let me just think even broader, why are these big cities, why are these big corporations, employers moving outside of our coverage area? Why can't they be encouraged from a tax break standpoint to come into our urban core? Number one, it helps employment, it helps us, and it helps everyone involved, particularly those who live in the city. One other incident that is actually a story in the Buffalo News where a young man from Black Rock had to drive his bike all the way to East Aurora, even further out to Salem's Field, which is West Seneca, Elma area, for tryouts. Well, I say, why are they having tryouts out in East Aurora for anybody, even if you're driving a car that's difficult? I think that we should encourage our community to have more city-based public access to transportation events, businesses, because walkable communities, it's a beautiful domino effect. Walking around Franklin, I was at Juneteenth as well. There's a community spirit there you don't see in the suburbs. You don't. A sense of community, a sense of family. Same thing with Allentown. There's a little bit of magic in that, outside of the planning. There's magic in these communities. There's magic in the city. There's something about being in Buffalo that's different from being in the suburbs. You're seeing people moving back to Buffalo for that very reason. I think COVID, definitely put a monkey wrench in that a bit, but that we have a new grocery store right in the downtown area.
Right across the street.
Right. So I mean, I think that and that's our job collectively, mostly NFTA's job. And I hear that a lot from people. Make riding the bus and rail cool again. And when we find the younger generation, millennials, the new graduates, they want public transportation. Amazon wants public transportation when they move into an area. They're not looking for I love the Bills and Sabres, huge fan. They're not looking for sports teams. They're looking for healthcare. They're looking for accessibility for public transportation. And a lot of people were surprised when they read that. But we did a lot of work to help that, to facilitate that. So sometimes it's sort of a Buffalo, let's look within to see how we can make really substantial, sustainable changes in how we plan and how we operate. Because I think it would make everything better.
For sure, yeah.
I do want to push back a little bit on some of the points that have been brought up. New York City is one most highly used transit systems in the nation. And it's not because of anything sexy, you go into the MTA subway stations and they're falling apart, literally pieces of ceiling, might
Those
land.
videos of water just
Right.
pouring,
Yeah.
sewage pouring into the system.
Yeah. It's because of frequency. It's because okay, shoot, I just missed that subway car. But there's going to be one that's going to be there in 2 minutes, and if we could just if we could make 10-minute frequencies a goal. I'm not saying we're going to reach that goal anytime soon, but let's make 10-minute frequencies within within 3 blocks of like where every resident lives, a priority, like that, make that like the goal. Like we will see increased ridership, you know, like as study after study says, like, you know, sure, Wi-Fi is nice, you know, like new seating's nice, all that's nice, but like what increases ridership is like reliable frequency. You know, like the length of the ride is not nearly as much of an issue for people. Like, you know, folks, you know, like we talk about the 20-minute driving commute, like in Buffalo, and how like that's like such a priority for folks. That's like less and less and less like an attitude. And you know, if you're spending 20 minutes driving, that's like 20 minutes so you can't do anything else, or you shouldn't be doing anything else. People do other things. You know, like it's, you know, if it takes 30 minutes to get somewhere and you're able to like, you know, like read a book during that time, you're able to like check your email during that time, that's a far better use of your time than it is like getting stuck in traffic and like, you know, trying to avoid, you know, like, you know, hitting like a pedestrian. Hopefully they're trying to avoid hitting pedestrians. That's not true of everybody. And I do want to also touch a little bit on we talked a little bit today about transit-oriented development. I really want to like, you know, make sure that we touch on like equitable transit-oriented development. I'm in like a cohort right now, which is like looking at like how we can like be, you know, really emphasizing equitable transit-oriented development practices with the new LaSalle station and such. You know, and you know, so it's making sure that we're including, you know, like affordable housing, like as part of like every like development, you know, that we come up with. You know, looking at, you know, like, you know, we've talked about like, you know, like issues of climate justice, you know, with like the embodied carbon, like making sure we're integrating all that as well. But yeah, so it's making sure that like we're not displacing the folks who are already using public transit, you know, like when we're doing these developments. Like, you know, if we, you know, put in like a fantastic new development in LaSalle, you know, like condos and everything, and all of a sudden, like all the folks who, you know, have been living in that neighborhood for 30, 40 years, you know, who rely on that system, can't afford to live there anymore, we have failed, you know, like, so we need to like be, like with every single one of our policy decisions, like looking at that 100,000 and like making that like what we base our policy decisions on.
It's something that's been brought up on this panel that surprisingly, I'm a little shocked that I haven't thought about this. And Helen, you should have triggered it for me. The industrial development agencies and how we sort of subsidize sprawl, and then we subsidize this system of bringing corporations out to areas that aren't served properly, and then corporations turn around and they demand better services from the NFTA in order to attract more talent.
And many of those organizations serve the underserved.
Exactly.
And they're out in the suburbs. That's just, you know.
I'm wondering if there's a way that the thought of industrial development can be shifted, maybe to, you know, maybe the IDA doesn't pay someone to build a building, doesn't pay a developer to build a building for a corporation, but maybe they pay the NFTA to run service more frequently. And I know that there's a model for that at the legislative level, at the state level.
Yeah, it's very successful with their TriMet. And they have a very robust, arguably one of the best systems in the TriMet.
But along those lines, right, we're talking about affordable housing and we're talking about access to transit, access to jobs. And I guess this is a rhetorical question, but I just wonder if there's even an appetite for shifting money around in that way. I know Jim wanted to say something and Anna wanted to say something, so I'll let you two duke it out on who talks first.
So Citizens for Regional Transit has a new 2022 petition, and that very topic is a new core thing in that petition. There are a lot of IDAs. They compete against each other within counties and across counties, and the suburban ones all try to lure businesses out to the suburbs. There's no cohesiveness, there's no thought process given to the idea that the whole region should be treated, and the kinds of things that Helen was talking about, where you're concentrating businesses that need to serve people into the core area that is served by public transit. because spreading them out, the Amazon warehouse out in Lancaster, how do you serve, you know, you need 200 or 300 people a day at a transit stop to make this stop worthwhile. And there's like this giant thing in between. And if the NFTA wants to run a scheduled bus out there, then they also have to guarantee paratransit for a certain radius. That's costly. And after this, can we talk about transit funding?
Sure, we can talk about that briefly, of course.
Because that is why we have roads and highways, not very much transit.
Yeah, I mean, I just kind of want to piggyback off that a little bit. I think in this area specifically, and other Rust Belt cities that have experienced kind of that mid-century to late 20th century decline and now are experiencing a revitalization of sorts, there's a lot of emphasis on anybody coming in is going to be positive no matter what we do with them, and there's a lot of give and not very much take in terms of what happens when those groups decide that they want to come here. Like when Amazon decides they want to come here, it's not what is Amazon giving back to us, it's we just want the business here. And so as we, as this area becomes more and more attractive for outside agencies, I guess, to come in and want to have a footprint in this area, it is probably more important, more now more than ever, to really think, okay, well, when these organizations come in, what are we asking for? And of course, the regional overlook is so important, because if the city of Buffalo say, well, we're not going to entertain this company unless they're willing to meet X, Y, and Z, and then East Amherst comes in and they say, well, we don't care. We'll just, whatever, we'll have them here. Then it turns into okay, well, all of the goals of a couple municipalities in the region are completely shattered when one municipality decides that they really aren't on board, because the folks that live in their community aren't going to be impacted by it. The company doesn't care. So at the end of the day, it's having that regional approach. And so, you've got these 5 major employment centers in the city, or in the area, and a lot of them are serviced by bus, but it's what kind of jobs are the folks, or are the areas located. If there's overnight shifts and there's no overnight bus routes to take folks there, that the folks might be more limited to being able to be employed there if they don't have reliable vehicle transportation. And yeah, there is this perception of as soon as you can afford a car, you buy a car. And I have so I work 2 jobs, and one of my jobs is I work as a technician for Apple, and so I work at the Galleria Mall, and that's kind of like the extent of the importance of that. And the Galleria Mall is, at one point was not serviced at all by bus. And there's a whole reason behind that, which I'll get into in a second, but one of my points, I have a couple coworkers, actually a significant number of coworkers who don't have a car. They rely on Uber or at times public transit. If they live in the city of Buffalo, the transit, you can get to the mall relatively easily, and it doesn't take super long. It's maybe 15 to 20 minutes versus 45, which is a difference, but it's reasonable. I have a coworker who lives in Cheektowaga. Kid you not, like 8-minute drive from the mall down Union Road. It would have taken him to take the bus an hour and a half to get 10 minutes down the street, because there's that lack of interconnectivity within the suburbs.
You probably have to go from the suburbs into the downtown core and then back out.
Yep. And it would be honestly faster to walk, but walking is about an hour. So, it's a whole slew of issues. And as soon as he could, and he was paid, $30, $40 a day, and during peak time, sometimes $30 each way via Uber, that's half the day's pay. Via Uber, and that's for a job that pays more than minimum wage. So at the end of the day, that's just, thinking about that is just, it's that interconnectivity, that regional approach, and also saying, okay, well, these are where the jobs are right now, and the jobs probably aren't leaving from there. The Walden Galleria Mall is not closing anytime soon, we think. The job areas, the Cross Points Business Park probably is not going anywhere anytime soon. So it's thinking about those different things, and how the equity for folks who might want to work at those places but feel as though they can't because they don't have a vehicle. When the Galleria Mall was open, they did not have bus routes that were going there, and it's a huge area of employment, especially for service workers who are overwhelmingly, people of color who are working in the service industry, more higher percentage than average in terms of racial demographics. And so that initially, of course, was an issue of folks would have to cross the street, cross Walden Avenue, which is just such a heavy traffic area. It's one of the busiest intersections, if not, I think, the busiest intersection, Walden and Union, in the entire region. And of course, that led to a lot of dangerous situations. Somebody got hit by a car and passed away, which is why the NFTA was then, by that lawsuit, required to have stops directly on property.
Wait, let me just correct you there.
Yeah.
That was driven by the mall ownership.
Oh, yes,
We were
yes.
not,
Oh, yeah.
we did not choose to go.
Oh, of course.
To that.
No,
Yeah.
you don't get to necessarily pick where your
People
roots
think
are.
though
by the
that.
property.
No.
That's a common misconception.
Thanks for stepping in. I'm not
That's
saying
okay.
that the
No,
NFTA didn't
that's
want to
okay.
service, but the mall did not want the NFTA to have stops on that property. And so that is thinking about, okay, if these companies are coming in, even to this day, why don't they want public transportation, direct public transportation access? Yes, we can encourage these companies, okay, well, if you do X, Y, and Z, you can support funding a stop nearby to be able to allow people easy access either for shopping or for accessing the service or for employment. But what if the company says, no, we don't want, but why is that? So when you think about that, that's a racial justice issue. Who are the primary users of public transportation? That's an economic justice issue. Who are the primary users of public transportation? So the mall, and is then required to have bus stops, and the NFTA pivots and puts bus stops there. And then you have, a couple of years ago, you have these issues at the mall where there's some fights break out among teenagers. You go online, you look at the comments, immediately, we need to cut off bus routes from the Walden Galleria Mall. People that are coming in on the buses that are causing these problems. So, when we look at transit, we look at encouraging, it's not necessarily, again, it's not the NFTA that's saying, well, we don't necessarily want to have, it's looking at the businesses and looking at the institutions that may not want transit, and then of course the public perception of what transit is. And honestly, the racism and the classism that is affiliated in this area, in particular with public transit, that you don't necessarily see in other areas, in like New York City, where you have a really large amount of folks of all varying backgrounds, of course, higher, low income, higher people of color, but still a little bit more inclusive in terms of access. So, I know that was a little bit disjointed, but it's kind of thinking about why is there this negative background behind or negative perception around public transportation, particularly when it comes to accessing areas that aren't located in the city of Buffalo, or businesses and institutions outside of the city of Buffalo, and changing that perception of, it's not riders of public transit are not the problem, it's this background of like racism and classism that really fuel this perception around public transit and why public transit doesn't necessarily resonate with folks throughout the broader region.
And thanks, Helen, for jumping in with that additional information.
Thank you. I
Because,
didn't
it's
mean to.
important.
No, I know you did. That's
So-
why I just wanted to clear.
I want to let Bridge jump in, because Bridge has a bit to talk about, and then we're going to sort of pivot to the next thought, which is about how to get it.
Something I've always been very curious about, like studying more, that I haven't seen too many studies on, is like those who are just barely car ownership people. There's an entire segment of folks who they're relying on Uber, to get around, or they're relying on a rental car, like a rental agreement that's like predatory, that's literally if they don't pay that week, there's remotes that can shut your car off. A lot of people who are just above the poverty line are locked into these predatory cycles, and it's so extractive, and the cost of car ownership. I really think it's one of the reasons our region is continues to have issues with poverty. Is we are forcing people into if you want to get a job, like a gallery or whatever, you need to have a car, or you need to have access to a car. A lot of
pay cut.
it's even a barrier to applying for a job in most places. If you don't have a car, you're told oh no, we're not going to hire you. And so a lot of people are just they're stuck, and it's this is where public policy needs to be intervening and being okay, we're this is like a systemic issue, and this is how we fix it. You know, like we need to like, you know, have public transit access, and you know, like we need to like be able to, you know, help like bridge that gap for folks. So yeah.
So yeah, that's really, I mean, we're really touching on the heart, I think, of the issues here. So I wanna sort of segue into our last thought here, which is how we can get involved, right? There's all different ways, from the grassroots level to very high levels to get involved. So I'm gonna start with you, Helen. Should I call Sean Ryan's office? Should I write a letter to Mayor Pete? Like, what do we all have to do? What would the NFTA like us to do?
I mean,
Do you think?
honestly, like, I think there are many ways. I think it's not a quick fix, right? And we have a lot of mileage here and baggage that's not good, right? We know that. Sometimes when you have a lot to improve, you don't do anything, right? Because it seems overwhelming. I feel like that. I think we've got a lot to do. I think that, and I just wanted to talk about the frequency. You're absolutely 100%. That's all the riders say in every survey, frequency. And I just did want to bring up the bus rapid transit.
On Bailey?
Yes, that is such
It's an exciting project.
It's a super exciting project. As someone who goes down Bailey and, you know, sometimes in the car, sometimes on the bus, and it's like, you know, it's really bad. The infrastructure there is so poor, as it is on Buffalo's east side. You know, it's the same thing. Really bad infrastructure. But those are, I think, it's hard to say one thing. I think that we need to continue these conversations, and I think that everyone makes a big difference. You know, and I think that actually, when you talk about what can we do, you know, the NFTA has to do a lot as well. We have to listen. We have to be we have to be present in these grassroots organizations. We do our best. We bring everybody in through our CAC and our AAC, our accessibility group. They give us a great personal view on accessibility issues. But I think that, you know, when we're all taking turns on what I can do, you know, I want to do my job, and a big part of my job is listening to the community, listening to the riders, because that's the most important thing. So what I can do is I can, you know, attend meetings, get more involved in some of these grassroots organizations, and know, and I'm telling everyone this sincerely, my office is always open, my phone's always ready 24/7, because we do the airport, so I'm 24/7, so I want everyone to know that I am always available to anybody who has, you know, any suggestions, or wants to start anything. I do think that starting small is always best, but also thinking big. That sounds really cliche, but it's the truth. I think that sometimes the biggest improvements we have made in the NFT since I've been there have been through small projects with really passionate people. And I did want to mention just two things really quickly, before we talk about what we can do. We have two new young people in our Metro division, Nadine and Crystal Everett. We've made such big efforts in supporting Pride Festival. It was just so wonderful to be part of that initiative. Also with Juneteenth, you know, we were out there. That was two people, you know, starting those initiatives within the NFTA and making a big difference. And when we were walking down at Pride and Juneteenth, you know, we felt some love, and that's not, we usually don't get it. And no public transportation agency does, you know, no one's gonna say, I love your route, it's perfect. But I feel like we are changing as an organization, evolving with Buffalo. And that's sincere, and I speak for Kim Winkle when I say that. You know, we do care so profoundly about our community, and really want to hear what we can do to improve and be part of this awakening, this social awakening that we're seeing. So that's what I
totally agree with that, and I do have to say that you know, the NFTA has been so accessible with Bryan and I throughout this process, and so, you know, we really thank you for being open with this and participating. It's clear that there has been a change since a long time ago versus now, so I think we all appreciate that. So Jim, you know, you represent the, like as you said, the oldest citizens participation apparatus, I'm losing my words here, for transit advocacy. So maybe you could let us know more about your organization and how to get involved.
Okay, so the Buffalo has a richness of organizations, and there's this nice umbrella agency, the Partnership for Public Good, and both CRT and BTRU are under the umbrella of PPG. And we have this enormous organization that is just doing so good. It's like amazing. Our organization has benefited tremendously. We've done collaborations. Helen knows that one thing that didn't come up in people who are served are people who are immigrants, who are not citizens, who maybe don't even read and write English at all. And so we produced a video, and they're using the video to help people get around town who can't read and write. Whatever talent you have, whatever interest you have, there is a need for you in our organizations. CRT needs people to help. I'm sure BTRU also needs people to help. We need volunteers, and anybody who wants to get involved can very, very easily get involved. Just grab the brochures at the table, contact Partnership for Public Good, contact CRT. We have things for you to do. CRT, we did tabling at Juneteenth. We wanted to table at UB. We don't have enough people to table at UB. We've got a laundry list of things that we'd like to do, and we need more people. We could use 25 more people active to help us accomplish our mission. In terms of our region being influential in the country, well, Chuck Schumer is the top dog in the Senate. He got through a $1.3 trillion transportation infrastructure bill. Sounds like a lot of money. Well, Congress said about 80% of that has to go to highways. So, well, that leaves 20%. What does that 20% have to cover? Well, the largest chunk of that is going to go to Amtrak. So that's 17%. So now we're down to 3%. That's got to cover the airports, the ferries, the public transit agencies, MTA, all these other agencies. By the time you're done, NFTA-type agencies throughout the country, that's like 0.2% of that $1.3 trillion. So your input in changing some of the way Congress thinks about it, we have close to 65% of people in this country living in urban areas, but 0.2% of the transportation infrastructure money goes for urban transit. It's like there's a big disconnect there, and that leads to the structural racism that you very eloquently described. So join any of our groups. Comment on Facebook, comment on Twitter, whatever you do, your opinion counts. What you say really, really matters.
Any thoughts, Alan?
Yeah, I mean, I would just echo that and saying, you know, we work, Partnership for Public Good really is kind of we call ourselves an intermediary nonprofit because we support a lot of grassroots nonprofits, and CRT and BTRU are just two examples of the organizations we support, and they're really heavily involved in transit grassroots efforts. And so when I speak about these issues, a lot of times it's really, I mean, I've lived in Buffalo my whole life, and I've used public transportation in Buffalo, but I'm not a regular user of public transportation by virtue of the area that we live in. And so when I emphasize, it's like, okay, I'm sharing research, I'm sharing information. You know, if you're not educated, if you're not a user of public transportation or lived experience, you know, do that research, talk to people. But most importantly, I think the biggest shift in policy in general that needs to be made when we're talking about equitable change in this area is what Bridge said earlier, which is we need to focus on the people who are actually using the systems and the people who rely on the systems for their day-to-day tasks and their day-to-day needs, and not the folks who, like the choice riders and that sort of thing. And I understand the reason behind that is because there is this whole thing where, okay, we need to increase our ridership so that we get more funding. And so how do we increase our ridership? We focus on the choice riders who have an option versus the people who rely on it who are going to take it regardless because they have no other choice. And so when we focus on the folks who rely on public transportation, which again, not saying that NFTA doesn't do that, but you know, of course, there's kind of a you know, push and pull where it's, you kind of have to have a balance. But having those conversations with the folks who rely on it are going to give us the most insight into the changes that are going to be most helpful. And that's true with any kind of policy. You have to go to the people who are actually living in communities that are affected by whatever issue we're looking to resolve and really get that feedback and that information from them, because the people who are closest to the problem are truly the people who are most ready and eager and qualified to participate in building solutions. So that's kind of my take and my you know, recommendations is, you know, always get involved with the groups that are grassroots, the groups that are doing the work and that are most involved with people who are closest to the problem, who are members, whose members are people who are actively involved in whatever issue, and in this case, transportation.
So, you know, first of all, yes, please join Buffalo Transit Riders United. There's a sign-up sheet in the lobby. It's the purple sheet. I didn't bring a sign-up sheet, so I grabbed some paper. You know, yes, like there's a sign-up sheet in the lobby. You know, like I'll get you connected with our organizer. There's also Buffalo Mutual Aid Network, you know, which is, we work with them around issues of, you know, like the sidewalk snow plowing. You know, so you know, like every winter we get together around Rosa Parks Day, you know, and do like you know, that's the middle of February, like when like the sidewalks are the absolute worst, and we do like a you know, an annual like, you know, like bus stop clearing, you know, like getting like the snow out of the bus stops, getting the sidewalks accessible again, getting those humps that, you know, like are blocking all the intersections like cleared. So you know, join Beach Route, join B-Man. There's also, you know, like a easy step like everybody can take, you know, it's just like make a commitment, you know, take transit like once a week, like, you know, you ditch your car once a week, you know, for your regular commute, you know, and bring a friend, you know, like, you know, like one of the things like, you know, to get more folks like involved in like riding transit is like, it's a little intimidating the first time you use it. Like I came from like a rural part of the state. You know, and you know, so I wasn't familiar with taking transit until like the first time I moved to a city, and it was like a little intimidating, like the first few times. And even like, you know, like moved to Buffalo, like, you know, like it's a new system to learn. So having like, you know, like that one-on-one contact to like learn the system can really help. But you know, it is like, it's systemic. You know, like ultimately, like, you know, these individual actions like that we take are not going to be like what changes things. It needs to be like systemic. So we need to be increasing operating funding in particular, like, you know, for our transit systems. Capital funding is great, like, you know, like replacing the you know, the older buses that are like less accessible, or you know, like adding like, you know, length to like the metro rail or whatever else. But it's the day-to-day operating funding that we really need to be increasing. So that's not like, you know, so yes, please contact your federal, like, you know, representatives in DC, you know, about like the fact that the Build Back Better Act, you know, still has this like tiny window that it might pass, like if we can like take action this fall, you know, before the elections. But you know, like really like hone in like more so on your state's like representatives in Albany and your Erie County representatives, like, you know, like right here in Buffalo. And tell them you want to see increased operating funding for the NFTA. Same time, you know, we need to like have riders like have the ability to like make those decisions about how that money is spent. So we did get like some legislation passed through Albany this past session that will like legislate that a requirement for a rider with disabilities needs to be on every single like upstate transit authority, like, you know, on the board of commissioners for every single one. But you know, like that's one voice. You know, like that's one voice on every single board. We need to be expanding that. Like riders, like we need to be like, you know, pushing very strongly that like as many riders like be on these board of commissioners, like making these decisions about how like the budgets are spent as possible. Yeah, like, you know, we talked a little bit about like for a minute there about, you know, how the NFTA has shifted. You know, I can remember like 10 years ago, like the majority of that board was developers. You know, it was like people like, you know, like seeing NFTA as like a way to like make money for real estate decisions. It's shifted that, you know, like because of I think grassroots pressure, but we really need to like, you know, make as much of that board as possible, like at every transportation authority board as possible, like more representative of that 100,000 as possible. I would say, like, you know, at the very, very micro level, like, talk to the Buffalo County Council, like, get them to, like, pass inclusionary zoning. Like, that's been, like, you know, tabled for years. Like, it's, like, yeah, like, there was a study that was done, like, 2017, 2018, something like that, like, said, like, okay, yeah, no, like, inclusionary zoning actually makes sense in these certain neighborhoods. But nothing's happened since then. So, contact your common council member and tell them, like, you want to see, like, you know, like much more emphasis on affordable housing, and like, you know, like why doesn't NFTA have like, you know, somebody in the planning office, you know, in Buffalo City Hall, like we need to like, you know, like be, you know, making sure that the city is like, you know, the city for some reason, you know, is like hung up on automotive, what's AV, like the automated vehicles, autonomous vehicles. You know, and like, you know, trying to like get this little shuttle going like around Division Street, you know, it's absolutely absurd. You know, and like at the same time, like they could be, you know, figuring out like, okay, how do we make like our public, like the public right of way that we own as a city, as like as residents of the city, more accessible for you know, our transit system. You know, how can we like, you know, we talked about, I was in New York City a couple weeks ago, which is why it's on my mind, but like they have bus lanes, you know, like in much of the city now, where it's like, you know, it's painted, it's like this is primarily for the buses. You know, if you're a cyclist, you can use this lane too, but if you're a car, stay out of this, like especially during rush hour. Like why don't like it just makes so much sense to like have that like in like a few spots, and hopefully like with the BRT Bailey, like we can see that actually happen. But that's going to require like the city to be involved. So talk to your common council member, tell them like you want to see that sort of thing too. And yeah, just a little plug, I would love to see the 7 brought back, you know, so if you could, you know, pass that along. Yeah, the 7, you know, that was like my favorite
I
little
also
line.
took the 7 line.
Yeah. It was like my favorite little bus line, and you know, and like
They had the tiny little buses sometimes.
it was so cute, and it was like so convenient, you know. Like the 3 is great, but it gets so crowded, and it's like it's a way of like alleviating some of that stress, you know, on the system. So yeah, like, you know, talk to NFTA about like, you know, small things like that. That like, you know, it's like you want to see service here or there, or you want to see like increased service here or there. You know, and yeah, just join B Troop. You know, please, like we would love to have you on board.
So, one real quick thing. There's this great graphic that the MTA put out of buses in their bus lane, and when there's like a car in front of it, it has this like laser beam that comes out and shoots the car, and then it warns you like you'll get an automatic ticket. But anyway, we're way past where we thought we were going to be. This has been a great conversation. So thank you all for participating. I know, you know, to come out on a Saturday and have your feet put to the fire is a bit much. So thanks a lot. Yeah, right. So I don't know. I don't think anyone minds if I wrap it up here. No? Okay. Well, thank you all for coming out, and thank all of you for coming out today, for giving us part of your Saturday. And if you haven't seen the exhibition at El Museo, we encourage you to come see it. You might see Desiree there. Desiree is a staff member. There's been some stuff added to it too, since we opened in June. So if you only saw it once in June, you might want to come back out and check it out again. It's open until July 23rd. So thank you all for coming out, and we hope to see you again soon.